Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AI UX Sync. Today is April 26th. And Sarah, I see that you're typing, but you have the first item if you want to
go. Yes. Okay. I'm going to link to this in a second. We had an engineer on the source code team create a really cool demo of continuous chat, which is eventually where we want to get to with the interactive common AI chat component. There was one concern, though, is that engineering is moving faster than UX. And so what we ended up with this morning is two different chat experiences, which we have reconciled, and we're going to wait to release it and align them. But I just wanted to share that with this group so we can keep an eye out for it. It came out of, it was surprising. And I think that's what happens when you put very strong engineers and tell them to go build stuff with no guardrails. So that was just the one point I wanted to make there. I also wanted to ask, Michael is going to be working on designs for this, but he does not overlap with us a ton. Justin and Katie, are you guys able to talk to him at any point? Do you have any overlap with him?
Well, Katie does normally.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess I do to some degree too. Normally there's two calls.
Oh yeah, I joined the other one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that later one is a good opportunity to have direct access to Michael.
Okay, cool. So this is a long-winded way of saying I would love your support in making sure that all designers are angling towards the same experience and helping engineers on their team do the same. I know that Verify is working on a conversational, or had been working on a conversational chat experience, and now they know that we are building the common element. So this was a public service mountain / ask for help / just making everyone aware.
Cool. And sorry, it's just hard to keep up with all of the things, but the one that you're building, this kind of continuous chat, can you describe the use case? I know that you're building the unified thing, but are you building for a specific use case, or how will that appear in the product?
Yes, great question. So the source code team is building the explain this code block. They continue to iterate on their MVC because they are moving very quickly. And the demo, which I'm having a hard time finding, which will explain this to you, allows you to ask follow-on questions. So explain this code block. What does this function mean? Tell me about this variable. That is the use case. I would like the continuous chat to be a function we can apply to other use cases. That should be a common solution, I think, for things that need it. That if it's appropriate or natural for a user to ask follow-up questions.
Cool.
So
yeah, that totally answers the question. So I believe Michael was working on that, and the context in which you trigger this is when you're in the file view, viewing a code file. Is that right?
That's another great question. So I have put the Slack thread there. So the MVC was the interaction where you're looking at a file, and then you've got the question mark that appears on this side that you click, and then in context, it explains it for you. They turned it into a chat. They iterated on it. So it became a chat experience. I asked them to not ship that to production today. So it's not going to production, so that we can unify the user experience between the GitLab chat where you can ask questions about our documentation and the chat where you can ask questions about a block of code. It should be the same experience. We should not have two experiences. So they are going to wait until later this week, maybe early next week, so that Dennis can make the UIs look the same.
Cool, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, this is in line with the framework that Pedro is putting together as well. There are sort of three different levels of interaction.
Okay.
And the one that the question mark is in is a lower level of more context oriented. And then once they need more depth, then you would go to the higher level, which is chat or discussion or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So there was just a disconnect in that, I think. I mean, like we know, everything's going so fast. It's just
Okay, you just brought up a concern for me, Justin, though. Pedro is working on that?
he's working on the mental model, not anything design like
Okay.
special design.
Okay, when I hear things like that, I want to clarify because I've got Michael working on what the chat interface should look like.
Michael Lee is the designer, and I think all of us, all UX designers who are working on AI stuff are aware of this concept. So it's all good. It's all good.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
I just had kind of two quick FYIs. OpenAI terms require us to always disclose in the UI that the customer is interacting with an AI system. So I'm working on an MR, which hopefully will get merged today, around the exact language and copy guidance that we should use in the UI. Cool.
Last I saw is we were making it a little more generic, so we didn't have to specifically say open AI, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. And my next point is also just a quick FYI that we will release code suggestions, which is kind of our answer to GitHub Copilot, into the web IDE as a beta feature on the 22nd of May. I just linked the designs in the epic in case anyone wants to see. I'm just posting this here for those who may not have visibility of this feature to have a look.
Do you want to walk through? You got time?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, let me just maybe open up the epic. Share my screen. Cool. So basically what this feature is when you're inside the web IDE as an engineer and you're writing code, we use a model that we created to be able to recommend or suggest like an autocomplete style lines of code. We have an open beta for Visual Studio Desktop out at the moment, and we're fully focused on the web IDE. And the reason is GitLab as a company, the strategic direction is to really push for remote development. So we're putting a lot of investment into the web IDE. But yeah, basically it's pretty cool. I think the best one that I can show is different kind of ways that it can complete code for you. So single lines, it can also complete multiple lines, like an entire function. It can complete in the middle of the line. And it can also complete, if you just give it some instructions in plain language, it can actually generate code for you. And I think for the open beta, we're supporting like 6, 7, 8, 9 languages with a high level of confidence, but with the intention to expand to more. And there is also an intention in the future to expand this functionality into other IDEs, such as like IntelliJ, etc. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I'll stop sharing.
That's very cool. Do you know if the source code team who's working on the explain this code, are they working on the web or the standalone?
The explain this code that Sarah was just mentioning, or?
Yeah.
Isn't that in the GitLab product itself, not in an IDE? Or sorry, I don't understand your question, maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I guess I'm not sure where it is. I've only seen
at
quick demos. I haven't actually explored it.
The MVC is when you're in the file view in GitLab itself, as you're like selecting lines of code, you get this little question mark icon on the side that you can click on. So it's in the product itself. And as Sarah was mentioning, like, maybe we're going to expand that to other parts of the GitLab product.
I guess I always thought that was part of some IDE and not just a file reader.
Yeah, right. But I think the, GitHub Copilot actually does offer explain this code as part of your IDE. It's a feature that's currently in beta. But I think it makes sense to also extend that functionality into the IDE eventually.
Yeah, when I was talking to Moan at the beginning of the week, that's what I pinged you on, asking if you had designs for that, because she thought you did for some reason.
Yeah,
and,
I think
it seems like it should live there too.
We've got there's a lot of things that competitor products do, like they can generate entire missing test files. They can, there's some competitors have a bit more of that conversational, like, tell me what's wrong with my code. And then it's like, oh, there might be a security vulnerability. So, the stuff that Becca's working on, the stuff that Mike was working on, I think all of that functionality could be integrated also into the IDE eventually. But I would assume that my team is going to focus on improving the models so that we can cover more languages with a high degree of accuracy before we would kind of go into those additional features.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I have a feeling we might have to coordinate with those other teams to get them to integrate somehow.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool though. And that's the only app that's in beta that is using our own.
Yes. Suggested reviewers as well, which is now GA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but otherwise, we're not using third parties. I did have a customer call yesterday and I asked him about how he would feel about using third parties. And he's like, I just want the best feature. I don't care how. He's like, I don't expect GitLab to build these models, stand on the shoulders of giants kind of thing. So that was interesting, but he was working at a startup. So it might be a different perspective from an enterprise customer.
Yeah, especially once all these legal fights and stuff. Well, I guess depending what the result of those legal fights are and who owns the code and all that.
Totally.
Yeah. Different story when it's a huge company.
Yeah.
Okay, cool stuff. Your second point's read only.
Yeah. Lewa?
Yeah, I could just share what I'm working on quickly. Still just for awareness, let me just share my screen here. Might be easier. Let's see. All right. So originally I took on this issue here, or this is the epic. So this is another example of where engineering is kind of moving faster than UX here. And a lot of this has already been done, and there was already it was kind of like merged already, or just kind of, it's still under feature flag, but basically the idea is to summarize issue discussions. And in this UI, or in the first iteration of this, what happens, let me just, I don't know if you've all seen this. Are you all familiar with this? Have you seen this, Katie or Justin?
I don't think so.
Assume no.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is
So this is, I'm just gonna show this. So basically you have an issue, and there's a lot of activity in the issue. And we want to have the ability to summarize quickly, larger issues, what the issue is about, or summarize the activity of what the discussion's about. So in this first iteration, let's see here. There was a little new icon added into the toolbar, or into the new, like if you're creating a new discussion or thread here, there's a new little Tanuki icon that lets you summarize the comments. And once you click that, it just kind of puts a summary in line as like another item within the activity thread. So So after thinking about this, it doesn't seem like, and thinking about the problem that we're trying to solve, it doesn't seem like we want to just have another summary inside of the, yeah, see, this is the summary right here. So it gets summarized within your input window, and then you have the option to like copy and paste it somewhere, or just, again, submit it as a comment. So I thought that interaction wasn't kind of what we wanted, or what, it's not really solving the problem of summarizing. It doesn't seem like you want to like post that as a comment, your summary of the activity thread. So yeah, long story short, after lots of discussion, I think it was Gabe that created, and we were talking kind of back and forth about this, and then Gabe created a new issue here that is to move the summarization workflow out of the activity feed. So this is the newer design here. And just quick note, I just got feedback from Michael on this. I haven't kind of looked through this yet, because I know he is kind of working on the kind of unified experience of the drawer. So the idea here is you'd have some kind of button here around the activity. Once you click that, it would pull out the drawer to give you a summary of what's happening in the thread. And the idea here is, you know, you'd maybe want to compare whether the summary is correct still with the actual thread. You know, you might want to look at both, so you could still kind of scroll through the thread and see the summary. And also, I think there's some issue that I saw, that I came across, that any kind of text heavy AI experiences should probably leverage the drawer just for consistency's sake. So I just have to look through this, but just wanted to make you, it's more of making you both aware of kind of what I've been working on here. And I'm going to work with Michael Lee and Alex on kind of unifying this experience and making sure that it's a similar experience when the drawer comes out. So the drawer doesn't always look different depending on, you know, where you are. So, you know, thinking about this more, it might be that, you know, we always have the drawer, you know, contextually kind of have options in there depending on what you could do on that page. For example, on the merge request page, you might want different options inside this drawer versus, you know, if you're on the issue, or if you're on like on a planning board maybe, or if you're on like the optimize or value stream analytics, you might have like different options that AI can assist you with, or some options there. So yeah, it's just kind of thinking a little bit more ahead, or about how this drawer can maybe be leveraged. But yeah, that's all I have for this for now. And then I'll have more updates later, hopefully by the end of today, of how this will change. But let's see here. So again, there's also an MR for this, but again, the MR does this here where it summarizes the activity here. So this is going to be released at this point, and then there's going to be another follow-up issue then to get in the drawer. So it seems like again, like engineers are just working faster than I could keep up, even with the UX on some of this stuff. So I've been having to kind of put the brakes on things, but I also don't want to stifle you know, our momentum here, and I want to make sure that, you know, we're actually testing even what this is kind of coming up with. So that's why we decided to just like, let's get this merged, let's get this out. Again, this is still under feature flag. But yeah, so that's kind of the balance that I've been kind of having to do here. So I don't know if any thoughts on that. It's like with not releasing something versus kind of trying to release it and get feedback on it.
I think you're taking the right approach. We're in an experimental phase. It's okay for engineering to be working this fast as long as it's still in the experimental phase.
Okay.
The guidance is that in general, UX isn't really expected to do much while in this experimental phase.
Okay.
But if your team has the time to have that group's designer support it, I don't see a problem with it. Especially since this use case seems fairly relevant. A lot of people, like, it's one that popped into my mind when I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, and I think everyone's kind of had the same scenario. So it seems like a problem that could use solving. So I don't think it'll go away, in other words.
Okay, got it.
Since this feature is
Yeah,
already
so-
in production in some way, I would be really interested if you could run some user testing with people's their own GitLab and actually have them interact with it and give commentary on the usefulness of the content that it generates.
Mhm.
To understand, is the content actually correct and useful? Do they still need to go through and read all the comments to double check it?
Mhm.
And like,
Right.
you know, what are they looking for when they get a summary? I think that's the benefit of having something out in the world, is we can actually test it with customers' real data.
Great point.
Yeah, we do have there is a feedback issue on this feature right now. There is some useful feedback that's come through already. I did, as I was playing around with it in that MR, it's kind of interesting because I tried creating just like a quick, really simple issue about, you know, should we make a mobile app? And I kind of made up some fake names about, put a discussion there. There was only like maybe like 5 threads I put in there. And it was interesting because every time you kind of regenerated the summary, it would slightly change. It wouldn't always be the summary, even though none of the comments changed. So I thought that was a little interesting. Yeah, so I'd be curious to see also, you know, what this looks like or what it comes back with larger issues or issues with a lot more activity. There's currently a limitation there with, you know, the token size of how much you could how much data you could send at once. So there's another issue that's being worked on right now at the moment to be able to send like a larger chunk of, or break it up somehow and send larger chunks back to OpenAI at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to be able to test that, because currently, and there's also another issue that I've been working on with error handling. So right now we don't really handle errors really well. So if there is an issue with a lot of, you know, activity and you click generate the summary, nothing happens, you get no feedback. And so that's some other things I'm working on is right now, the error handling around all this stuff.
Makes sense. I was just thinking about the user's degree of trust, especially like if we take your sample thing, should we make a mobile app? If it were me using that and there's like a million threads, I'd almost rather ask a question, which is like, hey, AI, should we make a mobile app? And it summarizes it, but also maybe links to the comment where the final decision was made. Because if it's a high risk, you know, like if I'm looking for specific information and the AI gets it wrong, I would not solely trust the AI. I might use the AI to have the inclination to double check what the AI said. So I wonder, I can see a value of maybe a bit more of a conversational interface in the future, and also citations, like where did the AI get this information, so that I can quickly jump to that.
Yeah, that's a really good feedback there. I think someone brought up something similar, that they would like to kind of somehow link to the threads from the drawer then into the actual activity. But yeah, I love the idea of citations and yeah, and just being able to ask it, like you said. I think that's a really interesting way, instead of you having to again read another summary and then kind of try to map them, you know, back together somehow.
Okay, so that actually brings up one of my questions that I wrote next is, should this maybe be part of the chat UI that Sarah was talking about? You know, maybe it's
that's a good question.
that's the drawer, you know, that's the drawer that you basically open.
Right. And that's kind of what I was kind of thinking more and more too, is like, it seems like a lot of these experience, because the chat is getting so good, that you might just want to ask it certain things, or maybe depending on the context of what page you're on, it might hint at a question or like an example question that you might want to ask. Like we were thinking also a little bit with this in the value stream analytics, instead of looking at all these charts and stuff and graphs and trying to see what's going on, you might want to just ask the interface or have the chat interface open and ask it what metric changed, what's the most significant change, why did it change? And it would just kind of give you links to what to look at, or just give me the highlights, what's going on, instead of you having to kind of look through it. So that's just, again, one case of maybe value stream analytics where this might work. But yeah, it seems like, yeah, that's a good question though. Overall, should everything just be almost a chat now? I was kind of against it at first, but it seems like it's getting so good that it's kind of almost nice to have like a real person to kind of ask, what should I do here? What's going on?
Yeah. And I think that helps get around the quality issue, because you might think that you're seeing something or expecting something to come up in that thread and it doesn't. So then you can ask, hey, what I thought this was about this, and then it can search it and be like, oh yeah, here it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And we might like want to surface something first, the information, but give you the option to pop open the chat, for example, in some of these cases, like to kind of.
Yeah. You can even do things like,
clarify.
that doesn't look right. I'm pretty sure this thread was about this, and then it can go back and refine.
Yeah, I could definitely see that work in there.
Yeah. I mean, when I've been playing with chat a lot while doing a side project, just so I can get acquainted with the model of conversational. And if you let yourself relax a little bit, it starts to feel very sci-fi. You can really just like, no, that's not right. Or is there an easier way to do that? And because I thought you could do it some other way. And then it goes, oh yeah, then you can. And then it starts telling you. It's crazy, but I think that's pretty standard.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I was trying, when was it? Last week, I was looking into it as well and playing. I'm trying to just develop a quick Django app and Django view kind of app. And I just started, I'm like, can I do this with Open or Chat GPT? And went down the same route. And I was also having that kind of like Star Trek sci-fi moment almost, where it's just like, oh, well, you should try this and this. I'm like, well, what if I did this? And like, oh, you just start having like a real conversation almost. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we lead in with being open to the chat experience, it does help to assuage that concern around if it's just text and you're like, well, I guess that's all I can get. I can regenerate and see if it does something different. Otherwise, I have to go back and compare. And then at that point, is it really saving you time?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, I'll circle back with Mike Lee and Alex then on some of these experiences and see how we could unify that. But yeah, I love the idea of maybe, here's some information that we think is relevant. If you want to, if you want more, you could kind of open up or have the chat right there to kind of ask it more.
Yeah.
Or to get more details on.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thank you both for typing.
All good. You just reminded me, Libor, you released that predictive chart for deployment frequency, I think it was.
Oh yeah, it was the forecast. Like yeah. I think we just ended up using, there's no AI usage there. We use linear regression, some kind of linear regression model at the moment. I think there is some yeah, I kind of need to circle back on that issue to see what kind of feedback we're getting on that.
Cool. Because is it it's out, like customers can use it? It's not just internal?
I think so. I'll have to double check on that.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, let me make a to-do for myself here. Sure. Yeah.
Sweet.
And just to bring it up, I know that Pedro made a comment in the Slack channel, and I alluded to it earlier. He is putting together a conceptual mental model framework thing that he's going to do a walkthrough on, a quick video walkthrough, and then share it with all of you, all the designers in the UX AI integrations channel for feedback. I think it's pretty awesome. Very simple And, but, to the point succinct wise, but I think it'll be pretty helpful to help us get consistent and wrap our heads around the patterns that we want to use. So I think he's shooting for the end of this week to get a video out or something.
Awesome. And yeah, speaking of Pedro, I mentioned it before we started the recording, but I might actually push this meeting to be like 1 hour earlier, so that Pedro can also attend these. So that means, I guess, Libor, you'll still be sleeping.
5 a.m.
can...
Libor?
Yeah, I might watch the recording then after.
You can go to the APAC one, and same with you, Justin.
Yeah, I'll
and
stay with the APAC one then. Yeah, it's fine.
if we have low attendance for this one, then I'll cancel it as well. It was just an idea for like Becca and there's a couple of other people in America, Europe, I think. So
Yeah, the timing an hour early won't be bad for me. It'll just be bad because I usually have a lot of my other meetings in the mornings. So I may not be able to attend because of that.
cool. Well, yeah, we can just play around with it. But yeah, I was just thinking it's kind of good if you can come to at least one, Justin, and Pedro could go to the other one, and then we have kind of the full coverage.
Perfect. All right. Is there anything else going on? Yeah, no, that's good. All right.
Thanks,
Cool.
everyone.
Well then, thanks, y'all. Good to see you again. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.